What began as a routine celebrity interview had now spiraled into something raw, uncomfortable, and painfully human. The atmosphere inside the studio had shifted, the once cheerful energy replaced with a heavy, uneasy silence. The audience, once laughing and clapping moments earlier, now sat frozen in disbelief. Joy Behar leaned forward in her chair, her trademark smirk plastered across her face. There was a glint in her eyes, sharp, probing, unapologetic. She had the air of a prosecutor about to corner her witness, and her tone dripped with false sweetness. "Everything I've said tonight has been fair game," Joy scoffed. "You're a public figure, sweetheart. You put yourself out there. You open yourself up to criticism." Her words hung in the air like a challenge. At the opposite end of the table, Sarah Haynes looked visibly uncomfortable. Her nervous smile flickered, then faded completely. She shifted in her seat, glancing toward Whoopi for help. "Maybe we should take a quick break?" she suggested, her voice uncertain, almost pleading. But Joy wasn't having it. She waved a dismissive hand in the air. "No breaks," she declared sharply. "We're just getting started, Julia." A ripple of tension moved through the audience. Cameras zoomed in instinctively, capturing every twitch of emotion on Julia Roberts' face. "Let's talk about your marriages," Joy continued, her tone suddenly colder. "3 marriages, was it? That's not exactly the fairy tale image you like to project, is it?" The words hit the air like a slap. A collective gasp escaped from the audience, loud enough to echo through the studio. Even the cameramen seemed to pause for a moment, uncertain whether to keep filming. Whoopi Goldberg's face was a mix of shock and disbelief. Her eyes widened, and she immediately leaned forward, her voice firm and protective. "Joy," she said, her tone cutting through the tension. "That's completely inappropriate." But Joy didn't back down. If anything, she looked almost amused by the pushback. "Is it?" she challenged, leaning even closer toward Julia. "She talks about love and relationships in every interview. She makes movies about finding your soulmate. But her personal track record tells a different story, doesn't it?" The words were sharp, too sharp. The air around them felt heavy, electric. Julia's expression faltered. Her hands resting on the table were trembling slightly. Whether from anger or humiliation, it was hard to tell. "My personal relationships," Julia began slowly, her voice measured but tense, "are exactly that. Personal. They have nothing to do with why I'm here today." Joy wasn't satisfied. She pounced on the answer instantly. "But they have everything to do with who you are," she said, her tone cutting like glass. "They show the gap between the image and the reality. They show that maybe, just maybe, you're not the relationship expert you pretend to be in all those romantic comedies." A few people in the audience gasped again. Others muttered under their breath. This wasn't entertainment anymore. It was a public ambush. Julia's jaw clenched. For a moment, she said nothing, just stared at Joy with eyes that glistened under the studio lights. When she finally spoke, her voice was low, steady, but burning with emotion. "I have never pretended to be an expert on anything," she said through gritted teeth. "I'm an actress. I play characters. That's my job." Joy laughed, that harsh, almost mocking laugh that carried no warmth. "Right," she said with a smirk. "You play characters. But the problem is, you never stop playing them, do you?"
"Even now, even here, you're still performing." Julia's face went pale.
The mask of composure she had held so tightly throughout the interview was starting to crack. "When do we get to meet the real Julia Roberts?" Joy pressed, her tone biting, her words relentless. There was a long, unbearable pause. Then Julia leaned forward, her voice trembling but fierce. "You want real?" she asked quietly. The audience held its breath. "You want to see something real?" she continued, her voice growing louder, shakier, more emotional. "This is real, Joy. This hurt you're causing, this humiliation, this embarrassment you're putting me through in front of millions of people. This is real." Her voice broke slightly on the last word. The pain behind it was raw, unfiltered, unpolished, the kind of honesty that can't be rehearsed. For the first time all morning, Joy hesitated, but only for a second. Then she leaned back in her chair and smiled, a slow, satisfied smile. "Good," she said softly. "Finally, some honesty." The audience reacted instantly, a mix of gasps, murmurs, even a few scattered boos. The camera cut briefly to Whoopi, whose expression said everything: disbelief, frustration, and disappointment. She turned sharply toward the producers behind the scenes and made a subtle hand motion, signaling to cut to commercial. But Julia wasn't done yet. Her breathing was uneven, her eyes glassy with emotion, but her voice was steady as she spoke one last time. "You know, Joy," she said, "you think what you're doing is journalism, that it's brave or necessary. But it's not. It's cruel. You've confused cruelty with honesty. And that's a shame." Joy opened her mouth to respond, but Whoopi cut in decisively. "We're taking a break," she said, her tone firm and final. "Now." The theme music swelled awkwardly as the show abruptly cut to commercial. The audience was left stunned, some clapping weakly out of habit, others whispering to each other, eyes wide. As soon as the cameras stopped rolling, Julia stood. She didn't look at Joy, didn't say a word. She simply removed her microphone, handed it to the stage manager, and walked off the set without looking back. The silence she left behind was deafening. Whoopi sighed heavily, running a hand over her face before turning to Joy. "That," she said quietly, "was out of line." Joy shrugged as if unfazed. "I was just asking questions," she muttered. "No," Whoopi said, her voice cold. "You were crossing a line." When the show returned from commercial, Julia's seat was empty. Whoopi addressed the camera with professionalism, but her tone carried weight. "We want to apologize to our guest and our viewers," she said. "Sometimes conversations get heated, but respect should always come first." And just like that, the moment became one of the most infamous episodes in The View's long, chaotic history. Clips of the exchange flooded social media within hours. Headlines lit up every entertainment site. Julia Roberts walks out on The View after Joy Behar's personal attack. Fans rallied behind Julia, praising her composure and condemning Joy's cruelty. Comment sections overflowed with messages like, "Julia handled that with grace, and Joy went too far this time." In the end, the confrontation became a lesson, not about fame, not about relationships, but about boundaries. Because even the world's most beloved actress has limits, and on that day, live on national television, Julia Roberts reached hers. The studio light seemed brighter than usual, harsh and unrelenting. Every camera was locked on the table, every eye in the audience frozen in disbelief. What had started as a cheerful interview had now turned into a slow-motion implosion, a battle of words, pride and raw emotion. Julia Roberts sat upright, her face calm but her eyes flashing with a storm she could no longer contain, her voice low and steady, cut through the silence like a knife. "You're not a journalist right now, Joy," she said evenly. "You're a bully, and I've spent too many years of my life dealing with bullies to sit here and let you continue." The word bully hit like a thunderclap. Joy Behar blinked, visibly stunned. For a moment, the sharp confidence that had defined her all morning seemed to drain away. Her face flushed crimson and her trademark smirk faltered. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out immediately. The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats, the tension so thick it was almost suffocating. "I am not a bully," Joy finally snapped, her voice shaking between anger and disbelief. "I've been doing this job for years and I've never been called that." Julia didn't flinch. Her eyes remained locked on Joy's, her tone steady, unwavering. "Then maybe it's time someone told you the truth," she said quietly. "Maybe it's time someone pointed out that there's a difference between being provocative and being cruel." A murmur rippled through the studio audience. Even the camera crew seemed hesitant to move. Joy's jaw tightened, her nostrils flaring slightly as she tried to regain control of the moment. "You want to talk about cruel?" Joy shot back, her tone rising, defensive and bitter. "Let's talk about how cruel it is to lie to millions of people. Let's talk about how cruel it is to present yourself as something you're not." Julia's head tilted slightly, confusion and hurt flickering across her expression. "And what exactly am I pretending to be?" she demanded. "What terrible lie am I telling by trying to bring joy to people through my work?" "You're pretending to be perfect," Joy spat. "You're pretending to have all the answers. To be this beacon of light and happiness when real people, are struggling with real problems." The words hung in the air, sharp and personal. Julia exhaled slowly, shaking her head in disbelief. "I have never claimed to be perfect," she said softly. "I've never claimed to have all the answers. All I've ever tried to do is my job, to entertain people, to tell stories, and maybe make someone smile for a couple of hours." But Joy wasn't ready to stop. Something in her had snapped too. Her voice rose again, louder this time, spilling out frustration that had clearly been building for years. That's the problem, Julia. You make it look so easy. You make it seem like happiness is just a choice and like success is just about having a pretty smile and a positive attitude. Julia blinked, genuinely taken aback. And that bothers you? She asked quietly. The fact that I try to stay positive bothers you? It bothers me because it's not real. Joy suddenly exploded, slamming her hand against the table. The sound echoed across the set. Life isn't a romantic comedy, Julia. Life is hard and messy and disappointing. And when you go around pretending otherwise, you're doing a disservice to everyone who's struggling just to get through the day. Her voice cracked slightly, emotion spilling through the anger. For a fleeting moment, the audience could sense that this wasn't just about Julia anymore. Joy was venting something deeply personal, something she hadn't planned to reveal. The other hosts sat frozen. Sarah Haynes's eyes darted nervously between them, her lips pressed tightly together. Sunny Hostin's hand covered her mouth, and Whoopi Goldberg looked as if she were silently counting down the seconds before she had to step in. But she didn't. Not yet. Because the silence that followed was too heavy to interrupt. Julia sat there, motionless, her face unreadable. But behind her eyes something shifted. The composure that had carried her through years in the spotlight now replaced by something stronger, something real. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft. But every word carried weight. You know what, Joy? She said, pausing for just a second as the audience leaned in. You're right about one thing. Life is messy. It's painful. It's unpredictable, and it doesn't always end the way we want. I know that better than most. Her tone was calm, but her eyes glistened with emotion. But here's the thing, she continued. When people buy a ticket to one of my movies, they're not doing it because they want to see more pain. They're doing it because they want a little bit of hope. They want to believe that even after all the chaos, all the heartbreak, there's still something beautiful left in the world. And if I can give them that, and even for a moment, then I've done my job. The studio was silent. Joy sat back, her expression unreadable now, part defiance, part discomfort. The anger that had fueled her moments ago seemed to waver. Julia leaned forward slightly, her voice steady, almost tender. You call that pretending, Joy. I call it compassion. The words landed like a quiet thunderclap. Even Whoopi seemed momentarily at a loss for words. She glanced toward the control room, then back at the two women, her expression grave. Sarah reached out subtly, placing a hand over Julia's in silent support. Joy broke eye contact first. She looked down at her cue cards, her fingers fidgeting nervously. For the first time, she seemed uncertain, unsure how to recover, unsure what to say next. Julia, however, sat tall and composed, her breathing slow and deliberate. The storm had passed. She had weathered it, with dignity, not anger. And in that moment, the audience understood exactly what made her America's sweetheart. It wasn't perfection. It was grace under fire. When the show finally cut to commercial, the applause that erupted was hesitant at first, then thunderous, a wave of support that echoed through the studio. Julia smiled faintly, nodded politely, and rose from her seat. Without another word, she walked off the stage, leaving Joy staring after her, silent and shaken. That moment would replay across every talk show highlight reel for weeks. Headlines screaming, Julia Roberts calls out Joy Behar for bullying Liv on The View. But for everyone who watched it unfold, it wasn't about scandal. It was about something deeper. It was about standing up for yourself, mutter with dignity, honesty, and compassion, even when the whole world is watching. Because that's what real strength looks like. What happens when one of Hollywood's most beloved actresses meets her match in one of the most unpredictable talk show hosts on television? You get a clash that no one saw coming. A fiery confrontation that left the studio stunned, the audience silent, and the internet buzzing for days. This is the story of how Joy Behar pushed America's sweetheart, Julia Roberts, too far, leading to one of the most shocking walk-offs in daytime television history. The morning started like any other high-profile episode of The View. The studio lights blazed overhead, cameras panned across the cheering audience, and the familiar theme music echoed through the set. Moments later, Julia Roberts made her entrance, glowing with that effortless star power that only she possesses. Her signature megawatt smile seemed to brighten the room instantly, and the crowd responded with thunderous applause. Dressed in a flowing emerald green dress that caught the light with every step, her famous auburn hair cascading over her shoulders, Julia looked every bit the movie star she'd been for over 3 decades. She waved, laughed, and mouthed thank you to the audience before taking her seat beside the panel of hosts. Whoopi Goldberg, ever the gracious moderator, began the segment with genuine warmth. "Julia, welcome back to The View," she said, smiling. "It's always such a pleasure to have you here with us." Julia returned the smile, her laugh, that unmistakable, infectious Julia Roberts laugh, filling the room. "Thank you so much for having me," she said. "I love being here with you all. The energy on this show is always so wonderful." The audience clapped again, the atmosphere easy and light. Co-host Sarah Haynes jumped in next, her tone bubbly and enthusiastic. "So Julia, tell us about your new film. The trailer looks amazing, and if I'm being honest, it already made me cry twice." Julia laughed, her eyes sparkling. "Well, that's a good sign. It's definitely an emotional story, but also one about love, family, and finding hope when things get tough. I think people will really connect with it." Sunny Hostin followed with her trademark warmth and curiosity. "You've always chosen such emotionally resonant roles, Julia," she said. "Do you find that those stories reflect parts of your own life? Maybe your experiences as a mom or just as a person who's grown so much in this industry?" Julia's face softened. "Absolutely," she replied. "Every film I do, every character I play, there's always a piece of me in there. I think that's what makes acting so beautiful. You get to explore yourself through other people's stories." The conversation flowed effortlessly, filled with laughter, mutual respect, and the easy rhythm that comes when genuine people connect. But not everyone at that table shared the same energy. Because while Whoopi, Sarah, and Sunny were engaged, smiling, and clearly enjoying Julia's presence, Joy Behar sat back in her chair, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. She didn't clap. She didn't laugh. Instead, there was a faint smirk playing at the corners of her lips, the kind of smirk that longtime viewers of The View had learned to recognize. It was the look Joy got when she was about to start trouble. To anyone watching closely, it was clear something was brewing. "Julia, I have to say," Whoopi continued, "it's incredible to see how you keep reinventing yourself. You've done romantic comedies, thrillers, dramas, even producing. You never seem to stop challenging yourself." Julia nodded graciously. "Well, I've been very lucky to have amazing opportunities and to work with people I deeply respect. Every project teaches me something new." The audience applauded again, and that's when Joy finally leaned forward. Her tone was deceptively casual, but her eyes gleamed with mischief. "Speaking of new projects, Julia," she began, "I noticed you've been pretty quiet about certain controversial topics in Hollywood lately. You're one of the most powerful actresses of your generation. Don't you think you have a responsibility to speak up more?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop by several degrees. The audience's applause faded into uneasy silence. Julia blinked, taken slightly off guard by the sudden shift in tone. Still, she maintained her composure, that same calm, grounded poise that has defined her for decades. "Well, Joy," she began politely, "I think everyone uses their voice in their own way. For me, I try to let my work speak for itself. I believe in spreading kindness and awareness through the art I create, not necessarily through every interview." Joy raised an eyebrow, unconvinced. "Sure," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "But don't you think that's a bit of a cop-out? You've got influence, millions of fans who hang on your every word, and yet you stay on the sidelines when it comes to real issues. Isn't that just convenient?" The audience murmured, shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Even Whoopi's expression hardened slightly as she shot Joy a look that said enough. Julia's smile tightened, though she didn't lose her grace. "I'm not sure what you mean by convenient," she said, her tone measured but firm. "I think being thoughtful about what you say is just as important as speaking out. I don't believe in using a platform recklessly." Joy chuckled, that sharp, knowing laugh that always carried more bite than humor. "Oh, come on, Julia," she pressed. "You've played outspoken women your whole career. But off-screen, you're the picture of diplomacy. Don't you ever get tired of being so careful?" That did it. Julia leaned back slightly, her body language calm but her eyes colder now, steady, unflinching. Joy, she said quietly, are you asking me a question about my career or trying to psychoanalyze me on live television? The audience gasped, and Joy blinked in surprise. Whoopi quickly jumped in to defuse the situation. Okay, she said, forcing a laugh. Let's not turn this into the View Therapy edition, all right? We've got enough of that in the green room. The audience laughed, grateful for the release of tension. Julia smiled again, though it didn't quite reach her eyes this time. No worries, she said smoothly. I just prefer conversations that are respectful, that's all. The rest of the interview limped along, polite on the surface but charged with underlying tension. Julia answered the remaining questions graciously, but her warmth had cooled. The sparkle that had filled the studio at the beginning of the segment was gone, and when the cameras finally cut to commercial, Julia stood up, thanked Whoopi and the crew, and walked straight off the set. No hugs, no goodbyes, just quiet dignity. By the time the show aired, social media was already ablaze. Julia Roberts handles Joy Behar with pure class trended for 2 straight days. Fans flooded the comments, praising Julia's composure and criticizing Joy's confrontational tone. In the end, it became one of the most talked about moments in The View's history, not because Julia Roberts lost her temper, but because she didn't. She reminded the world that strength doesn't always shout. Sometimes it smiles, stands up, and walks away, because even America's sweetheart has her limits.